Yo, what's up, my source lovers? It's Virtual 1670 here, back with another guide. Today we're going to be talking about the source and how much I love it and what we did to improve and move on for Season 1 on the patch notes. Unfortunately, source has got a really big nerf, but we have overcome. We made it to 100 and we did a tier 95. So let's get right into it. Today we're going to be talking about Paragon, skills, aspects, and gear. I hope you guys like it, and I'll see you at the end of the video. Alright guys, so let's start with the skills that I used for my endgame build and leveling up at the same time. We're going to put 2 points into Firebolt. We're going to move down to core skills. We're going to put 5 points in Ice Shards all the way to Destructive Ice Shards. We're going to put 1 point in Devastation, 3 points in Elemental Dominance. We're going to move down to the next tree, which is Defensives. We're going to put 1 point in Flame Shield all the way up to Shimmering Flame Shield. We're going to put 1 point into Teleport all the way up to Shimmering Teleport. We're going to put 3 points in Elemental Attunement. We're going to go down to Ice Armor. We're going to put 1 point in Ice Armor all the way up to Enhanced Ice Armor. 5 points in Frost Nova all the way up to Mystical Frost Nova. And then we're going to move down to the next tree, which is Conjuration. We're going to put 1 point in Align the Elements. We're going to put 3 points into Mana Shield and 3 points into Protection. We're going to move down to the Mastery skill tree, and we're going to put 1 point in Inner Flames and 3 points into Devouring Blaze. We're going to move down to Ultimate skills. We're going to put 3 points into Permafrost, 3 points into Icy Touch, 3 points into Frigid Breeze, and Horror Frost, we're going to put 3 points into that also. Moving over to Deep Freeze, we're going to put 1 point into Deep Freeze, all the way up to Supreme Deep Freeze. Moving down to your key passives, we're going to use Avalanche for this build. If you're not having any mana issues, you could go to Shatter, but I used Avalanche. And that is it for the skills. Let's move on to the gear. Alright guys, so on to the gear. So we're going to start with the helmet. And on the helmet, I took Protector. And the reason why I took Protector is because it gives us a barrier when damaging elites. This is very important as we don't have much DR as sources anymore, along with the patch notes that came out for Season 1. So Protector I found was the best in slot for me. Moving on to the chest piece, we took Rymint of the Infinite. It's an amazing chest. I believe every source that runs close to an Ice Shard build or any kind of build, it's very useful as it sucks the enemies in and we can stun them for 2 seconds, or you could get 3 seconds. And the cooldown is increased by 20% and it's multiplicative. This is one of the best armors you can get for an Ice Shard build. Moving on to the gloves. I took Elementalist Doom and I put those on my glove, core, or mastery skills cast at or above 100 mana, gain 34% increased critical strike chance. Now, you can get this higher. This is all I found at the moment, but this helps us out a lot with our mana regen. It helps us keep our mana up and it keeps us going with our damage. Moving on to the pants. The pants I took Ever Living Doom. You take 25% less damage from crowd control or vulnerable enemies, which is very important because we're always making things vulnerable as we're attacking them. This is very beneficial to us. It gives us less damage from crowd control enemies, and it adds on to the damage reduction that we already have set forth on the gear I've showed you. Moving on to the boots, we put Fortune on the boots. Your lucky hit chance is increased by 15% while you have a barrier active. Now, if you see the chain in between these items, everything has something to do with barrier because damage reduction for us is very important. Moving on to the main weapon, I put Control on the main weapon. You deal 35% more damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. We are constantly immobilizing, stunning, and freezing enemies, so this is very beneficial to us. Moving on to the offhand, Piercing Cold. Ice Shards pierce 4 times, dealing 21% damage. Less damage per subsequent enemy hit. So for per pierce, it does less and less and less damage. That's okay because we're going to be dealing so much damage when we stop it. It's just going to be, you're going to see it's going to come out and frozen when you use your Ice Nova or your Frost Nova. You're just going to melt things like crazy. It's not even really going to matter. This helps. It is very amazing aspect to have on your offhand. Now, moving on to our ring. Our first ring, we took Prodigy. Using a cooldown restores 17 mana. This helps with utilizing how much mana we spend and getting it back just as fast, keeping our damage flowing. Moving on to the next ring, we took Storm Swell. You deal 17% multiplicative damage. It's increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. This is amazing because it increases our damage to vulnerable enemies. And we always have a barrier up. So this is very powerful. Moving on to our neck piece. I put Disobedience on the neck piece because we need that extra DR and it helps a lot when you're in higher tiers. Now, with this build, I have completed a 95. I haven't tried to push any higher than a 95. And at the end of this, you guys will be able to see me doing that 95. Some of the hearts that I took that I put in my gear is a Brutal Heart. 18% of incoming damage is instead suppressed when you use a defensive, subterfuge, or macabre skill. All suppressed damage is amplified by 250% multiplicative and explodes, dealing up to 17,000 damage. Now this ranges from 15,000 to 19,000 fire damage to nearby enemies. This is all extra added damage. Moving on to the next heart, a Vicious Heart. For each unique element you deal damage with, you deal 10% multiplicative damage all the way up to 12% increased damage for 5 seconds. You can go from 2 to 8. It does vary. It depends on what you have, but this is massive. This is called Talrashas. And moving on to the last one, of course, the holy grail and only wonderful, heart that everybody doesn't like, which is Barber. This is pretty massive for us as it does a lot of damage. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's going to be a game changer for you in the later tiers to come. Doing a lot of damage, especially with your Frost Nova and everything working together with the vulnerability and your barriers, and everything just adds up and does a lot of damage. Now, with Barber, critical strikes and all subsequent damage within 2.5 seconds. It does range from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. It depends on what you feel you're more comfortable with. I would like to do a 2 second because that means it explodes faster and you can get damage out a lot quicker. Or you could go with 4 seconds and get some bigger damage. I think it's around 56% increased damage for multiplicative. And it absorbs your targets. So the subsequent damage within 2.5 seconds is absorbed by your target. Then the absorbed damage erupts into the surrounding enemies. Store damage is increased by 14%, which is multiplicative. I've seen crits and damage coming off of bosses and mobs that would hit 30 million plus. So this is very beneficial to us. This is the gear I've used. It's amazing. I haven't had any issues. Like I said, I've done a 95, and I hope all of this gear helps you guys. If you want, you can switch it around and make it your own, but I do recommend running with what I have on now. So let's go over the paragon board that I use. So in the first glyph, we are going to go with Destruction, and Destruction gives you critical strike damage. Critical strike damage increases all damage the enemy takes from you by 2%, multiplicative, for 10 seconds, up to 12%. After you're done on this board, we're going to move up, and the next board you're going to use is going to be Icefall. And in Icefall, the glyph we're going to be using is Frostbite. 160% damage to chilled enemies. The bonus is enemies deal 30% reduced damage to you for 5 seconds after they are no longer frozen. When we are done in this board, we're going to move on to the next board. And that board's going to be Burning Instinct. And in Burning Instinct, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take Reinforced. Now, the reason why I went with Reinforced was to give myself an extra 10% damage reduction while you have an active barrier. A lot of the mitigations and DR that we have right now is barrier and helps us stay alive longer with all the changes that happened in Season 1. When you're done in this build, the glyph, we're going to go up to the next board and we're going to look at Enchantment Master. And the glyph we're going to be using in Enchantment Master is Control. It gives 101% damage to crowd control enemies, and you deal 10% multiplicative increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies, or instead 20% increased damage to stun or frozen enemies. After this board, we are going to move to the final board. And the final board is Frigid Fate. In Frigid Fate, we're going to go with Territorial, which gives damage to close enemies, and you gain 10% damage reduction against close enemies. So a couple things that I changed in this board itself is if you go down to Burning Instincts, they had you go all the way down here to go to damage reduction from burning enemies. Well, because we use Barber in this build, it really doesn't do much. I found that I wasn't getting the full benefit of what this would give me because I was running Barber. So it gave me some extra points and I was trying to figure out where I should put these points. So I went over to Icefall and I found that if I veered off a little bit, I could get damage reduction to chilled enemies, which we are constantly chilling enemies. So that helped us with our survival, and I felt that it really helped in higher tiers. After we were done putting points in here, I then ventured off into the board a little bit more and found that I could get myself into more cold damage. So we're going 20% cold, that's 25, 30, and 35% extra cold damage. This helped me a lot, especially with going up here and using a couple extra points that I had left and putting them into life. As the more life we have, the more barrier, the more damage reduction we had for some of the skills and nodes that we took within these trees. So that is pretty much the Paragon board for the Ice Shard source. If you have any questions, throw a comment down below, and let's carry on. Let's move on. So that's the build. I'd like to thank you for watching and taking the time to explore what I've done on my Ice Shard build, and I hope it helps you guys out too. If you guys liked the video, put a thumbs up. If you guys have any questions, put a comment down below. Don't forget, I do stream on Twitch TV. That's Virtual1670 on Twitch TV. And thank you guys very much, and I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you very much. Peace out, guys.